Carmelo Anthony is the sixth best one-and-done player in the history of college basketball. I mean, what are we doing here? That is just absolutely ridiculous.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
College basketball report, you have severely disrespected Carmelo Anthony when you were ranking the greatest one-and-done players in the history of college basketball. Hello, everyone. I'm Jackson Holzer. This is Locked On Syracuse, and thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are going to discuss College Basketball Report's most recent rankings of the greatest one-and-done players in the history of college basketball and how Carmelo Anthony being ranked sixth on that list is just absolutely diabolical. We'll go over the greatest one-and-dones in the history of college basketball, where Carmelo should fall on that list. And finally, we'll end the podcast discussing how Anthony Davis is the one-and-done player who may have a case to be ahead of Carmelo Anthony in the one-and-done rankings. All that and more here on today's edition of Locked On Syracuse. But before we get to everything, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. College Basketball Report on Twitter at CBK Report released a list of the best one-and-done players in the history of college basketball. Now, College Basketball Report has nearly 100,000 followers over on Twitter, and he's normally very well versed in college basketball. But when we pull up the rankings right now, you will see, if you're watching this on YouTube, that Carmelo Anthony is rated sixth among the top 30 one-and-dones in the history of college basketball. For those that are listening, I'm just going to read you the top six, okay? We don't need to go through every single or all 30 names here. Zion Williamson, number one. Michael Beasley at two. Kevin Durant at three. Cooper Flagg this past season at four. And Anthony Davis at number five. Let's go over Melo's achievements, and then we'll compare him to some of the other players that were ahead of him on the list in the next segment here, because it's just absolutely absurd how Carmelo Anthony isn't even a top five one and done. I mean, look, I get I'm a Syracuse host. I'm a Syracuse alum. There's bias here for sure. But I mean, comment below in the comment section below right now. Where do you think Carmelo Anthony sits all time among players that were one and done in college basketball? And if you don't understand what I'm saying by one and done, it means you played one season in college basketball and that was it. You did something else afterwards. Most likely you went to the NBA draft, right? I'd argue, and this is a separate argument, that Carmelo Anthony is the greatest player in the history of Syracuse basketball. He was only there for one season. I get it. Just 1 year, 2002, 2003. But he led Syracuse to a national title. It's the only national title in the history of Syracuse basketball. They've had tons of great players, tons of great teams, lots of chances. But the one time that Syracuse got it done was when Carmelo Anthony was leading the pack in 2003. His overall numbers, keep in mind, this is only as a true freshman, right? All these guys on the list are true freshmen. He averaged 22 points per game, 10 rebounds, 45% from the field, 34% three-point, over 1.5 steals, and nearly 1 block per game. Syracuse as a team heading into their national title season, for those that don't know, they were unranked. They were not necessarily a team that was supposed to compete for a national championship. In fact, when you look over the years of the history of Syracuse basketball and all the great teams that they've had, even entering the NCAA tournament, I don't think many people had Syracuse winning the national championship in 2003. Like, look, I get it. I was only 1 year old at the time when Syracuse won. But still, I mean, you can go back through the history books, read old articles, listen to what people say. And I don't think many people were picking Syracuse in their March Madness bracket in 2003. I mean, they had a strong regular season. They were 23-4 that year. They won the Big East regular season title. And Syracuse was given a 3 seed for the NCAA tournament. And then in the NCAA tournament, Carmelo Anthony averages 20 points per game, 10 rebounds per game. He had 3 straight double-doubles from the Elite Eight on. So Elite Eight, Final Four, national title, all double-doubles for Carmelo Anthony. And he shot nearly 48% from the three-point line in the NCAA tournament. 48%. Bringing it back to today, we talk about Nate Kings a lot here on this channel, the transfer from Oregon State, and how excited we are to have him on the team this upcoming season, because last year at Oregon State, he shot nearly 45% from the three-point line. Well, Carmelo Anthony in the NCAA tournament shot nearly 48% from the three-point line. He was the NCAA tournament's most outstanding player in 2003, and his 121 points in the NCAA tournament were the third most ever by a freshman. Facts. All facts about Carmelo Anthony as a one-and-done player in college basketball. So when I list off the achievements of Melo in that season, it's kind of, you don't even need to think about some of the other players on the list. Just his resume alone, you would think that that's probably someone who has a top 3 all-time one-and-done season. And not to mention, I talked about how Syracuse basketball did not have necessarily the highest preseason expectations in 2002, 2003. They were unranked in the preseason poll, 3 seed heading into the NCAA tournament. It's not to disrespect the entirety of the roster, but Carmelo Anthony that season only had one other player that would go on to play in the NBA, and that was Hakeem Warwick. That was it. So when in the next segment, when we discuss the other players that are ahead of Carmelo Anthony, I think for the most part, they all had more NBA teammates. So Carmelo Anthony leads Syracuse to a national title as a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament with, don't get me wrong, it was a very good team. You obviously have to be a good team to win the national championship, but it's not like he had the 2nd overall pick and the 5th overall pick also on his roster. One future NBA teammate in Hakeem Warwick. That was it. So Carmelo Anthony being 6th on this list by College Basketball Report, absolutely absurd. Total disrespect to, in my opinion, the greatest player in the history of Syracuse basketball. And I guess I'll ask you that. Who do you think is the greatest player in the history of Syracuse basketball? Do you agree with me? You think it's Carmelo Anthony, or maybe you think it's Pearl Washington or Derek Coleman or Dave Bing? Jim Boeheim will always mention Dave Bing. Comment your thoughts in the comment section below who you believe is the greatest Syracuse basketball player ever. Now, coming up, we'll discuss the first 4 players that are ranked ahead of Carmelo Anthony as far as the greatest one-and-dones in the history of college basketball. So that's coming up next on Locked On Syracuse. The NBA Finals are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. The Indiana Pacers had a shocking comeback, or really was it shocking given the amount of comebacks the Indiana Pacers have had in these playoffs? They won Game 1. They stole it in Oklahoma City, but the Thunder bounced back the other night to tie the series at 1 apiece. And whether it's a game-winning shot, a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. because if you can head to FanDuel.com right now, place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Again, if you're new to FanDuel, you place your first $5 bet. If that bet wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. And before we continue discussing where Carmelo Anthony's 2002-2003 season should rank among the greatest one-and-done seasons in the history of college basketball, I just want to thank you all. We recently on this channel hit 4,000 subscribers. A year ago around this time, we were sitting at about 2,000. So we have doubled in the span of a year, and that's all thanks to you. Yes, you, the listener, you, the viewer, for continuing to watch and listen to Locked On Syracuse each and every day. It truly means a ton for those that subscribe each and every day. Obviously, thank you all so much. You are truly the best. And if you haven't done so already, please feel free, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. It helps the channel grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. Now, I'm going to pull up the list again from College Basketball Report over on X, who's got nearly 100,000 followers, of the greatest one-and-done seasons in the history of college basketball. And we'll just start with the four in order, okay? Because, again, I think there's only one player that is ahead of Carmelo Anthony on this list that actually has a case to be ahead of Carmelo Anthony, and we'll get to it in the third segment. That's Anthony Davis in 2012 over at Kentucky. But the first four ahead of him, and keep in mind, they're also ahead of Anthony Davis, who's fifth on this list. Zion Williamson, Michael Beasley, Kevin Durant, and Cooper Flagg. Let's discuss all of them, okay? Number one, Zion Williamson, 2018-19 over at Duke. I mean, he was dominant. That's very recent. That Duke team, led by Zion, was incredible. Having said that, I discussed in the previous segment how Carmelo Anthony had one future NBA teammate on his roster. Well, Zion Williamson had RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish, who were two of the other top recruits in the nation heading into that season. By the way, they were also one-and-dones, and RJ Barrett, in case you missed it, was also on that list of the top 30 best one-and-done seasons in the history of college basketball. Overall, Duke in 2018-19, this is counting Zion Williamson, they had 7 future NBA players. 7 of them. Oh, by the way, you would think that would translate to a national championship or a Final Four. Nope. Duke was knocked out by Michigan State in the Elite Eight that year. Remember that? That was a big upset. Was Cassius Winston still on Michigan State? I believe he was. It was a great game, too. But how are you going to sit here and tell me that Zion Williamson's the greatest one and done in the history of college basketball when he had this loaded roster around him? And I get he was great individually. I understand that. But he had this loaded team around him, and he doesn't even get them to the Final Four. They lose in the Elite Eight. And by the way, they could have lost earlier in the tournament. They had a game against UCF in the round of 32 where UCF is a layup away. They were a layup away from stealing that game. So Zion Williamson, to me, is not the best one-and-done player and certainly does not have a case ahead of Carmelo Anthony. Number 2 is Michael Beasley, 2007-08, Kansas State. Obviously, Michael Beasley was great. He'd go on, I believe, to be the 2nd overall pick in the NBA draft to the Miami Heat, and he was there right before the big 3 Miami Heat were born. But Kansas State in 07-08, they were an 11 seed, and they were knocked out in the round of 32, and Michael Beasley had 2 other future NBA teammates on his roster. Carmelo Anthony had 1 future NBA teammate on his roster, and forget the national title for a second, had more regular season success. He led Syracuse to a 3 seed entering the NCAA tournament. Kansas State, with Michael Beasley, as great as he was, they were an 11. Like, I understand that individual and team greatness is a little bit different, but at the same time, 11 seed Really? And out in the round of 32, and you're going to sit here and tell me that Michael Beasley is the second best one and done season ever? I don't think so. It's not to take anything away from what these players accomplished as true freshmen. They absolutely deserve to be on the list. It's just to sit here and say Michael Beasley's season was second all time, I think is ridiculous. Kevin Durant, 06-07 Texas. Keep in mind, we're not talking NBA accomplishments here. We're just talking about their one season in college basketball. Kevin Durant had a preseason top 25 team, 3 other NBA teammates, and that Texas team was knocked out in the round of 32. Was it Kevin Durant's fault necessarily? No, but he couldn't lead them past the round of 32. And you're going to put him ahead of Melo, who won a national championship and was the tournament's most outstanding player? I don't think so. And then finally, you got Cooper Flagg, and that's the most recent season, 2024-25. Cooper Flagg was outstanding. He was the best player in college basketball. I think we can all agree on that. Or it was him or Janai Braun. You pick. One and two. Cooper Flagg, let's be honest, he had a better supporting cast around him than Carmelo Anthony did in 2003. He just did. Right? How many players on that Duke team this past season are going to go on to the NBA? My guess is at least 6. Maybe you feel differently, so comment in the comments section below, but that's my guess. Obviously, the NBA draft hasn't arrived yet, so we don't know exactly how many will be this year and how many will be in the following years. But my guess, long-term prediction, is that Duke team will look back on that roster and there will be at least 6 NBA players on it. Duke was also supposed to be good. They were a top 5 preseason team, and to their credit, they were the best team in America. But they lost in the Final Four. They crumbled against Houston. And I honestly think that if Cooper Flagg had led Duke to a national championship, which, he should have. That Duke team should have won the national. They were the best team in the country, and they melted down at the end of the game against Houston. If Duke handles its business and they win the national title, top 3. Cooper Flagg's one and done season would be top 3 ever. It would be Carmelo Anthony, Anthony Davis, and Cooper Flagg. And what we're going to discuss in the next segment is how Carmelo Anthony and Anthony Davis are very close. They're neck and neck for the best one and done season ever. But then if Cooper Flagg and Duke had won the national title this year, I would put Flagg in that category. I would say it's neck and neck and neck between those 3 players. You can make an argument that one of them should be 1. You can make an argument that one of them should be 3. But either way, those would be the top 3 ever, in my opinion. It's just Duke lost in the Final Four. So overall, I don't think Zion Williamson, Michael Beasley, Kevin Durant, or Cooper Flagg, as great as they were in their one and done seasons when they were in college basketball, I don't think they have much of a case to be ahead of Carmelo Anthony or Anthony Davis. And speaking of which, we're going to discuss Carmelo Anthony versus Anthony Davis. Who is the greatest one and done player in the history of college basketball? And before we get to that, feel free to comment right now in the comment section below. Melo or AD? That's coming up next on Locked On Syracuse. Once again, I believe that Carmelo Anthony's 2002-2003 one and done season in college basketball is the greatest one and done season in the history of the sport. That being said, there's one other player I think has a strong case as well. That's Anthony Davis. And what's really funny is when we pull up the list from College Basketball Report, Anthony Davis is 5th. Carmelo Anthony is 6th. Those guys are 1 and 2. I don't even think it's particularly close. It's Anthony Davis or it's Carmelo Anthony. I'm going to tell you why Anthony Davis has a case, okay? And then we can kind of compare him to Carmelo Anthony, okay? First of all, each kind of have a reason for being lower on the list than they should be. I think when you look at Carmelo Anthony, his biggest quote-unquote flaw is that he was not a first-team All-American that season. He just wasn't. There were other players on the list. They were the best player in the nation. They won the Wooden Award. Carmelo Anthony, No, he was second team All-American. That's pretty good. Tournament most outstanding player. But he was not a first team All-American, and that's probably why he's ranked 6th on this list. Anthony Davis, he averaged only 14 points per game. I know it sounds silly, but I'm trying to understand why College Basketball Report had them 5-6. And I think those are the reasons why. Melo not being a first team All-American, Anthony Davis only averaging 14 points per game. That being said about Anthony Davis, the reason why he has such a strong case to be the best one and done season ever in 2011-12 with Kentucky, he's probably the best college basketball defender over the past 15 years. Who else? I mean, maybe Malcolm Brogdon over at Virginia. He was outstanding. Cooper Flagg, for what it's worth, outstanding defender at Duke in 2025. That's another reason why, had the team actually won the national title, he would have been sitting there with Melo and Anthony Davis. But Anthony Davis is arguably the best college basketball defender in the past 15 years. He averaged, you ready for this? 4.7 blocks per game. For context, Syracuse basketball as a team in 2024-25, so this past season, they averaged 2.5 blocks per game as a team. For more context here, there were only 24 teams in college basketball this past season that averaged more blocks per game than Anthony Davis in his one season at Kentucky. Again, Anthony Davis is one human being. He's only one guy. And he averaged 4.7 blocks per game. Now that I think about it, I don't think he's probably the best college basketball defender over the past 15 years. He is the best college basketball defender over the past 15 years. And you could start listing off some of the great players in the history of college basketball. Could you imagine how many records he would hold if he spent more than one season at Kentucky as far as blocks? He's only one human, but 4.7 blocks per game is absolutely insane. More on Anthony Davis versus Carmelo Anthony. Anthony Davis also led Kentucky to a national title in 2011, 2012, but Anthony Davis did have a better team around Carmelo Anthony. That's a common theme among all these one and done players, is that they had more NBA talent on the roster compared to Melo. I mean, he had 7 future NBA players. In fact, it goes beyond that with Anthony Davis. He played with the 2nd overall pick in the 2012 NBA draft. Anthony Davis was 1st overall, right? 2nd overall was Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. Now, again, we're not talking about NBA accomplishments or how they did in the NBA. We're talking about how they did in college basketball. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist was the 2nd overall pick. With all due respect to Hakeem Warwick and Jerry McNamara and all the guys on the Syracuse 2003 team, imagine if Carmelo Anthony got to play with the 2nd overall pick on the team in 2003, which in 2003 was Darko Milicic. But imagine you got to play with Chris Bosh, who was at Georgia Tech that year, or Dwayne Wade, who was at Marquette. Those guys went 4 and 5 respectively. That was essentially Anthony Davis in 2012. He played with the 2nd overall pick in the draft. So overall, when I factor that in, I put Carmelo Anthony slightly ahead of Anthony Davis. But I think it's very clear. So College Basketball Report, you got to redo your rankings. The best one and done season in college basketball history is Carmelo Anthony in 2003. The 2nd best is Anthony Davis in 2012 at Kentucky. And then you go from there. And if you want to make an argument that Anthony Davis should be ahead of Carmelo Anthony, I'll certainly listen to it. I would have no problem if that was how it was. But being 6th, I mean, that's just, again, diabolical. Comment your thoughts in the comments section below. Anthony Davis or Carmelo Anthony as the greatest one and done seasons in the history of college basketball. As far as what is coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the future, tomorrow, we were going to originally do this today, but because of this list from College Basketball Report, we had to push this episode coming up tomorrow. CBS Sports most impactful ACC transfers. We'll discuss what CBS had to say about Syracuse. Also, future podcasts. I mean, we're going to keep up with all the recruiting updates here on Locked On Syracuse. Basketball, football. Messiah Hampton, I believe, is committing this week, a 4-star wide receiver from Rochester, New York. Our most recent full podcast was with 24/7 Sports Syracuse insider Mike McAllister. So be sure to check that out. A lot has happened. A lot will happen over the course of the summer in recruiting. Also, it is the summer. Football position previews. We'll go over each position group heading into the 2025 college football season. So, all that to look forward to here on Locked On Syracuse in the future. And thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. Now, for your second listen, you could check out the Locked On Portal Show with football recruiting expert Brian Smith, who's got the latest rumors and signings in recruiting each and every day. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. In case you missed it, last weekend, I believe it might have been last Friday, the House settlement finally passed. We're not really discussing it too much here on Locked On Syracuse, but if you want more info on that, you can check out Locked On College Football and the Locked On Portal podcast for more information on that breaking House settlement, which we all expected would eventually occur. You can find the Portal podcast or Locked On College Football, for that matter, on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, hit that subscribe button. Turn on those notifications so you know right away when I'm dropping the next podcast. And also, feel free to just tell one or two of your closest Syracuse friends about the Locked On Syracuse podcast so this channel can grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. I will see you all again soon.